Welcome to OTR Debate, our off-the-record podcast where three lawyers debate all things while trying to remain unbiased, while trying to remain fun, and somehow talk about the law. Mm-hmm. My name is Lando. I'm a prosecutor. I'm here with Huy.
Hi, I'm Huy. I'm a contract attorney.
And I'm Mucci. I'm an immigration specialist in some ways.
We're here at a bookstore, and we're going to have a certain person that's going to introduce that for us. If you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's David McLean. I work here at the Book Cellar. Book Cellar is at 4736 North Lincoln, 60625. We sell beer, wine, and books. If you're asking me what comic book I love, I bought this in the serial form back in '86. So Watchmen.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
I still
Classic.
have my issues.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
I think I just have the graphic novel version where it was all put together. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's amazing you have the issues. Yeah.
yeah, the issues are hot.
Yeah.
In the Book Cellar, I mean, beer, wine, books. It's a great combination.
Yeah,
ask
yeah,
for.
right.
And
Yeah.
this is a great spot.
And
I love.
cafe, coffee. As evidenced.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I love the place. We're gonna see some books.
Yeah.
Right?
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so as you heard, we just heard from David, and this is actually a book that David wrote. The Answer to the Riddle is Me, and it's a memoir of amnesia. He's woke up on a train platform in India with no idea who he was or why he was there, and had to piece it together. So,
Wild.
Yeah, really interesting story, and we'd really like to buy this and read it. So, everyone, go ahead and do that too.
Check it out. You could get it here at the Book Cellar, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
I'm
Well,
going to buy it today.
Today's topic is comic books versus manga.
Mhm.
Manga? How do you pronounce that?
manga.
I've never read.
You're incapable of reading.
So, Mucci, what side are you taking here?
I'm going to do American comics this time.
Okay. Okay. Huy?
Yeah,
I'm
and
guessing
I'll
that leaves you with
be-
the opposite, huh?
Yeah, on manga. You didn't want to say the word again?
All right. As always, our format is opening statements followed by questions by me, the judge, in the episode. One always being a legal question. This one, I think we're going to have two. One legal discussion about something within the comics, and then one legal discussion outside of the comics, just to get a little bit of variety as to, comic book world, fictional world, and our real world society. You guys ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Let's start with opening statements. Who wants to go first?
You can go.
Okay. So, American comics, what I really think they have over manga is that I think American comics come sort of fully formed in terms of being very well drawn, but also with more often than in manga, full color, so you can really see, the vibrance of Spider-Man in all his colors, Superman, the dark tones of Batman, and the kind of noir aspects of those. Whereas in manga, I think they come to life more when they're actually adapted into anime. And, I'm a fan of One Piece, but almost more seeing it in action in anime adds so much to it, and seeing the colors that are finally applied when it gets to that process. So, not to mention the fact that all these incredible superheroes over the years that have inspired countless kids and made them want to get bitten by a radioactive spider so they can swing around their hometown, or maybe that was just my childhood.
Weird. Okay.
So yeah, I think that's kind of what sets them apart. And I think, along with American comics being sort of fully formed in their original format, I think that's often the best version of the story. So for example, Days of Future Past, decent movie, right? But it doesn't hold a candle to the original 2-issue, masterpiece comic. And not to mention how often the movies kind of butcher Dark Phoenix.
Yeah.
That, the way that's done in the story and the way things are hinted at in the original comic, and then she blows up into Dark Phoenix. It's so much better, and that's the the quintessential version of it is the comic book, and I think that's what it has over manga, where often the quintessential version, I think, is the anime.
Okay.
Some may disagree.
No, I'm kind of agreeing already. We've got your work cut out for you. So we heard from Mucci in his opening statement. You want to give it a go?
Yeah. So the American comic book industry is pretty much dominated by superheroes. Batman, Dark Phoenix, X-Men, all of these things.
Dark Phoenix.
Yeah.
Not really a superhero.
Well, I actually have no idea. I just know it was played by Sophie Turner. So, not in the comic, obviously, in the movie. But yeah, I think, in my understanding of the manga industry, although it is primarily split into 4 main categories called shonen, shoujo, seinen, and josei, mostly targeted by the demographics that are reading those types, and shonen being the more internationally popular ones. That includes like Dragon Ball, more action that's targeted at teenage boys, which often does overlap with the American comic book subject matter of superheroes, action, things like that. The overall manga industry just allows a lot more diversity in genres to flourish. You have slice of life, you have romance, you have crime, even cooking or sports. And I think in terms of readership, just manga has penetrated the Japanese society and overall international community more so than comics. Mangas can easily be adapted into anime, and that's not to say that comics have a harder time with that, but they're just more of a higher.
Not lately.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's why I think manga is just more broad medium of art than comics.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I've heard opening statements. We're going to go to the questions now. Typically, I would ask you guys the questions, but I think in this episode, we're going to go to our friends at the Book Cellar and see what they have to say.
Sounds good. So Grace from the Book Cellar recommended this, Liberated, and it's about their take on the life and love of Claude Cahun, an avant-garde artist and Nazi resistance operative, who, along with their life partner Marcel Moore, created a body of work that challenges the boundaries of identity. And those aren't my words; those are Grace's words in her recommendation of this. Seems like a great comic.
And so we also have Kelsey here with us, and I love that you guys have these little blurbs on your recommendations. Grace, she had the one that Mucci just read. Kelsey, you've got some of your own?
Yeah, the 2 I'm selling a lot right now. Promised Neverland, it's a manga. It's got an anime adaptation, but definitely one worth seeing the story through till the end. This orphanage group finds out they are actually a farm. Like the children are the farm for demons. It's really crazy. So it's kind of like this big brain plot of them trying to outsmart this society they're in. If you like something like Death Note, that's like very cat and mouse and
Love
smart.
Death Note.
Yeah. It's perfect for something like that. Very smart,
yeah.
Very high stakes. Abandoned Empress is a manhwa that I'm reading and I really recommend. Usually a manhwa, it's like this usually Korean girl gets isekai'd into another world and kind of has a very wish fulfillment life. This is kind of like a deconstruction of it, where it's actually the main character is someone whose life is derailed by said isekai trope, and kind of how she gets to try to start over her life and fix things. It's very sweet and feel good, I think, although a bit angsty. But yeah, love both.
A little bit of a contrast in those two.
It's very much so. Yeah.
Love it. Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
You.
Okay, so I've heard some interesting things about some recommendations. Let's go to the first of our legal questions, all right? So the first one being, tell me a court case, some legal stuff that's going on in either the comic books or the manga. Let me know what's going on in the legal community in your set of books. Huy, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I can. So there's a manga called Gakkyū Hote, or School Judgment. And in this series, the Japanese government has decided to set up a system called the classroom arbitration session, where they have these elementary, middle school students basically have legal power to be prosecutors, defense, and funnily enough, they do have a baby judge, because once these children grow up enough, they might be biased, so they use babies as judges. But they look more middle-aged because being judges takes a toll on your body, as you might know. Not to say anything about your body. But yeah, so even though these kids are like 12 years old, they're still tackling crimes that are more of adult nature. They range a lot, but they do include things as bad as like murder and drug use and things like that. So this was actually the artist. His name is Obata Takeshi, and he's actually the same mangaka that made Death Note and Hikaru no Go. So this one,
points with our judge here.
Mucci.
Yeah.
We knows that I like Death Note. That's for sure.
Yeah. So this, definitely falls into the shonen, like mainly targeted at teenage boys. So it's not going to be as like dark as maybe Death Note is, or violent, but
just like Lord of the Flies or something.
Yeah. A pig's head on a stick. Yeah. So I think that is it's obviously much shorter. Not obviously, I guess, but it was only from 2014 to 2015, so it was a pretty limited series compared to some other manga. Yeah. But it does tackle a lot of courtroom, like, even though they call it an arbitration, the setting, and it has, all the pieces of a courtroom, basically. And I just kind of wanted to touch on, it's a little harder, I think, to find more adult-like courtroom manga, because the Japanese legal system, in my understanding, has like a 99% rate of conviction, and that wouldn't be as interesting. So.
We did talk about that when we were
doing Phoenix, right?
Yeah, playing Ace Attorney, and that was it's kind of interesting. And somehow he was always getting it wrong. So I don't know. Mucci, you've got something for us?
Yeah. So just to go, Fantastic Four, one of the classic Marvel comics. Reed Richards once saved the life of Galactus, who would devour planets, obviously killing, billions of people in the process. So Reed Richards was put on trial for saving Galactus's life because he was allowed to then attack the Skrulls planet and cause the death of 7 billion Skrulls. The head prosecutor in that was Princess Lilandra of the Shi'ar Empire, and she called a survivor of the destruction of the Skrull homeworld. In addition to that, she called several survivors of other attacks that Galactus had engaged in to show that Reed Richards had knowledge of Galactus's prior devouring of planets. So Reed pled guilty to saving Galactus, but said that it was not a crime because Galactus is sort of a force of nature, and he's part of a greater plan for good in the universe. And long story short, eventually that is the winning argument. There are some other weird moving parts there, but that's eventually the winning argument when eternity makes everyone see that is the truth.
So I'm guessing this wasn't in the American legal system.
No, this was in like outer space somewhere.
He saved a tornado, and you can't fault him for that.
Yeah,
it was I guess it was some kind of like anti-Good Samaritan law then.
In a way, or like, yeah, obviously it's not using any kind of legal system we know of on Earth, probably. But if you did evaluate it on those terms, it could be one of three things potentially. Maybe conspiracy or accomplice liability or facilitation.
Okay. Because he did know what Galactus is all about, what he's always up to.
Yeah. But the thing with the first two that I mentioned, the conspiracy and accomplice liability or accessory to these crimes, would be that Reed Richards would have to have the intent that Galactus go on ahead and commit murder of. So Reed obviously didn't have that intent. He just was saving, a life that he figured needed to be in existence in this universe. So facilitation, I have like a definition here because I think people are probably less familiar with that than the other two. So in general, this isn't using New York law, where the crime took place, because Marvel comics take place in.
So wouldn't they have
mostly New York.
jurisdiction then?
Yeah, there was a whole thing I was reading about extradition to the. But getting outside of that, basically facilitation in New York is a kind of accessorial conduct in which an actor aids the commission of crime with knowledge that he's doing so, but without any specific intent to participate therein or to benefit therefrom. So you can kind of say that, maybe there's a reading of Reed Richards.
John Krasinski.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that version. But you can maybe say that he had that since he doesn't have to require the murderous intent. But I don't know. I don't think that would really work either. I don't know.
Who were the lawyers? Was She-Hulk a lawyer in this one?
I'm
Murdock?
not sure what representation he had actually.
Okay. Well,
but I mean, Matt Murdock, would he have to get a, pro hoc vice in outer space or whatever, interstellar court? But looking closer at the definition, just for our knowledge here and for informing everyone at home, a person is guilty of criminal facilitation in the fourth degree when believing it provable that he is rendering aid to a person who intends to commit a crime. He engages in conduct which provides such person with means or opportunity for the commission thereof, and which in fact does aid such person to commit a felony. But that means it turns on Galactus's intent and not Reed's. And at the time that Reed saved his life, he did not have the required intent to commit a crime at that point. So facilitation also, I think, wouldn't apply. But maybe you can make an argument that it would. Anyway, that's a...
probably could, but won't do it now.
Yeah. But that's an interesting, courtroom case in a comic, even though it took place in outer space.
Interesting.
I mean, we have a courtroom in a kindergarten and a courtroom in outer space.
Well, they were 12.
Running the gamut. Yeah.
Wildly different. Let's get to okay. So let's move it to a more, since you're going with outer space, you're going with tiny infants. Let's go to something more realistic. To the second question, tell me a real life court case or something legally related to comic books, manga. Intrigue me, if you will.
Sure. You want to go first?
I'll try to intrigue you. So, this involves an issue where in 1945, a plane crashed into the Empire State Building. And
This happened in real life?
This happened in real life, yes. And this young man named Donald Maloney, who was a 17-year-old Coast Guard hospital man. He was on the street outside when it happened, but he took it upon himself to be very heroic, and he went into a drugstore, put together a makeshift first aid kit, went into this burning building, the Empire State Building, and saved a bunch of lives. He was recognized as a hero by New York City Mayor and the Navy and the American Legion. So what then happened is that comic book publisher Lev Gleason published a story in Boy Comics, is what it was called, and made him the subject of a regular feature in the comic that was called Boy Hero of the Month. Just depicting what he had done in comic book format, right?
Boy Hero of the Month?
Yeah.
Is this a full-grown man?
He was 17.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. After that, Maloney kind of faced a little bit of issues. The Coast Guard thought that he had sold his story to the comic book, and they questioned him about that. There was threats of a court-martial. And then he also said that it interfered with his ability to find other work because people thought of him as a comic book character. So he filed suit. And the lawsuit was about Gleason violating his right to privacy. It's not defamation, I guess, because in the comic he didn't say he was a piece of shit or anything. He just he just depicted kind of what happened, maybe some exaggerations of the truth, but sort of just what he did, what happened. The circuit court initially found for the plaintiff, saying that a comic book story is de facto humorous or exaggerated for a purpose of generating sales. But the appellate court reversed and actually found for the comic book publisher Gleason, saying that the comic should not be classified as fictional just because it's representing things pictographically, but rather kind of defining it as a throwback to the earliest forms of communication, like hieroglyphics and stuff. We've always represented, ancient civilizations represented things first pictographically. So it's not necessarily meaning it's like exaggerated or meant to be a false story. So that was what was influential to the court and why they found that, in fact, he didn't have his right to privacy violated. It was a story that was real, and then he published it.
Did he initially agree to this? I mean, he had to have, right?
No.
Oh.
That's what it was. Because like that was with a problem that the Coast Guard would have had if he sold the story to them.
Right,
like,
but I mean, I guess that there's a difference between selling it to them and like being in an agreement. Like if someone's writing a comic book about you or some kind of book about you, I feel like maybe whoever's the artist or storyteller would have reached out.
But if you're representing a real world event,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I think he probably would have known.
Yeah.
Do you have something to tell us?
Yeah. So I'm going to discuss a case from 1999 called Texas versus Castillo.
Okay.
And it centers around a store clerk at a comic book store called Keith's Comics in Dallas, Texas. His name was Jesus Castillo. And he basically was charged with 2 counts of display of obscenity because he worked in a comic book store that carried adult comics that were in a separate section that were restricted. It was clearly marked, and it was not accessible to underage customers. But
Seems above board at that point.
Yeah, but a plainclothes police officer went into that section and purchased these books, at which time the clerk, Jesus Castillo, was arrested.
Did someone catch that cop that just went in there? Did someone like find him and then all of a sudden he's like, no, this is an undercover kind of situation?
Maybe Castillo recognized him. And was just like,
Something seems
I
a
know
little
what
fishy
you're
about
into.
this.
I know you like adult comics. But basically, yes. So that went to trial. He purchased 2 separate comics. I guess I should say manga because they were manga. So there were 2 separate trials. One of them was dismissed. The other went to verdict, and it was guilty. The prosecution basically used the argument that comic books are for children, and this comic book store is across an elementary school. And so the prosecution direct quote was, "I don't care what type of evidence or what type of testimony is out there. Use your rationality. Use your common sense. Comic books, traditionally what we think of, are for kids."
I don't care what kind of evidence is out there. Ooh, it's a bold prosecutor.
And so the defense called 2
God.
The defense called 2 expert witnesses. One was an American cartoonist named Scott McCloud, and another was a professor of Japanese culture and studies. Her name was Susan Napier, and they both testified for the defense. Also, notably, the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund spent tens of thousands of dollars on the defense for this. But ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, it was a guilty verdict. And this case grew considerable controversy, especially online, because in the public's eyes and the public opinion, they were all for the defendant. He was ultimately sentenced to 180 days in jail, and then probation and $4,000 fine. The people online raised that money online for $4,000 as well as for his defense. So it was clear that, comics and manga, etc., in the public's eyes are not just for children, just the jury, I guess. So
we're going to have an agreement here because I was just going to say that, like, whether it's manga or American comics, they're not just only meant for children. And I'm sure, speaking on manga, you'll see adults reading it on the train, in Japan. Like, it's...
And Mucci would know because he's been there.
Yeah, just got back yesterday.
That's true. I just... behind the curtain, recorded immediately before I left, and now I'm recording immediately after I got back from Japan. So, fortunately, not too jet lagged. So,
yeah. And so this case was sent to the Texas Appeals Court, Appellate Court, and then also the Supreme Court of Texas to no, real result after that. No change. The bookstore ultimately pulled all of their adult manga or adult comics from their store voluntarily. But yeah, just kind of demonstrating that manga in Japan, as I mentioned earlier, is just there's target demographics of all ages, all genders, and that's not necessarily the case here, where as seen by the jury, So
In Texas.
right, yeah, in 1999. But
Okay. All right. Glad to hear all that stuff. I guess I'll have a tough decision, and I'll come up with something. But I'll take this time to just let you guys know we appreciate you. Subscribe, YouTube, follow us on all social media. Give us a review. Thank you. All right. Closing arguments. You guys want to start? Just one sentence. Keep it very, very brief. I'm looking at you, Mucci. Do not be long-winded.
I won't. I just go back to what I said in my opening about comics kind of arrive fully formed and in their best format is in the original format, whereas I think manga really oftentimes need anime to bring them to life. For example, with Death Note.
Okay.
yeah, I think the fully formed version of American comics is not necessarily always the case, with a lot of spin-offs happening, like Days of Future Past, or all these crossovers with different superheroes and things like that, whereas manga oftentimes is a very clear beginning, middle, end. If they kill someone off, they're going to be dead for the most part. They're not going to come back and have a different personality like the Amazing Spider-Man or the Ultimate Spider-Man or, So, yeah, that's my closing.
Okay. All right. So now we're left with my verdict. For my verdict, I appreciate both of you guys bringing in some interesting stuff.
Just in general.
I do appreciate the the research that went into this. Both sides gave me some interesting stuff that I didn't know. I didn't know anything about manga, so I think I'm gonna have to give it to Huy, because what I do know is that manga brings out just as much as comic books do, without the color, right? I mean, there's no color.
Yeah.
Art.
Some people have a hard time seeing color too.
Huy is an example of that. And I do like that everything, a lot of the manga is like, there's series, right? Like you were mentioning, there's not going to be all these different kinds of Spider-Man and stuff like that, right? There's a series of manga that tells a full story within the, correct me if I'm wrong, within the collection, right? So that's like a full story, kind of like a limited series. If you were on like a TV show, which are my favorite kind of TV shows, just limited series, get one season, tell a full story, longer than movie, shorter than 8 seasons. It's perfect for me. So I think that's what I'm going to give it to.
Thank you. I don't want to misrepresent. There obviously are manga that are decades long too, but there aren't,
Might have to reverse myself.
but they aren't,
One Piece.
They aren't often going left and right with the storyline.
Judge, I think you convinced me, because not only do I respect that, I think I agree.
Okay. All right. So this has been a friendly debate.
The friendliest way to end it.